Okay, so today we are talking about triads. So triads are the simplest kind of chord. A triad is a set of three notes which are separated by thirds. I'm going to say that again because this is fairly fundamental. So a triad is a simple chord which is a set of three notes which are separated by thirds. So we know that there are two kinds of thirds. There are major thirds and there are minor thirds. So because we have two kinds of thirds, there are four ways that we can arrange two thirds to create a triad. So the most common ones that you'll see are the major triad, which is C, E, G, and the minor triad, which is C, E, flat, and G. So let's take a look at these. So from C to E, we know is a major third. From E to G is a minor third. From C to G is a perfect fifth. And then sort of flipping that around, from C to E flat is a minor third. From E flat to G is a major third. And again, C to G is a perfect fifth. And this makes sense because math. We know that from C to G is a perfect fifth, which is 7 semitones. From C to E is a major third, which is 4 semitones. From E to G is a minor third, which is 3 semitones. It's basic math, you just add them up. 4 plus 3 is 7. On the other side, minor third is 3 semitones, major third is 4 semitones. 3 plus 4 is 7. So these are pretty basic sounds that you've heard before. That's a major triad. So there's C, E, G. From C to E, that's a major third. From E to G, that's a minor third. C to G, perfect fifth. Now the minor triad, C, E flat, G. C to E flat is a minor third. E flat to G is a major third. C to G, perfect fifth. That's your minor triad. So these are the most common sounds that you'll hear in functional harmony, in tonal music. There are two other triads. There's the augmented triad, which is C, E, and G sharp. So C to E is a major third. E to G sharp is another major third. And C to G sharp is an augmented fifth. We call this the augmented triad. And then we also have the diminished triad, which is C, E flat, and G flat. C to E flat is a minor third. E flat to G flat is a minor third. And C to G flat is a diminished fifth. We call this the diminished triad. So normally, the major, normally when people are teaching this, they'll introduce the major and minor triads. Maybe they'll talk about the diminished triads. Often the augmented triads are kind of ignored. The reason for that is they are not naturally occurring in the major scale or the natural minor scale, which are the most commonly used scales. So you don't generally see the augmented triad coming up as much. But it's really useful to think about all of these as a set and a spectrum of brightness and darkness. That's the way that I like to think about it. So let's listen to these lesser used triads. So the augmented triad has that major third, and then it has another major third. So we have major third, augmented fifth. So you would say that this is a very bright sound, because we know that the major third is brighter than the minor third, and so when you have two major thirds stacked on top of each other, this is a very bright sounding quality.
Bright, like being stabbed in the face.
Sure. Yeah. Brightness and sharpness tend to go hand in hand. So that's one way to think about it, I suppose. And
it's
then
give me some murder vibes. That's
okay,
all I'm saying.
good.
It's a very accidental way to think about it.
And then on the other side of the spectrum, we have the darkest triad, which is a minor third and a minor third. So minor third, diminished fifth. So we would say that this has a very dark sound. So you can arrange these chords from brightest to darkest. So you arrange them on a spectrum. So from the brightest, we have our augmented triad, and then we lower that augmented fifth to a perfect fifth. Now we have a major triad. We then lower the third from a major third to a minor third. That's our minor triad. And then again, we lower the fifth from a perfect fifth to a diminished fifth. And that's the diminished. So that is the full spectrum of triads from brightest to darkest. So that's a good way to think about it and organize it in your mind. Because you can use these triads to a certain effect, whether you want it to be bright or dark. Basically, major is bright, minor is dark, augmented is brighter, and diminished is darker. That's what you want to do. So I'm actually gonna break off to do a really quick exercise. I want you to play all of these triads on the keyboard. Start with C as a root, just to get through them, and then try a few other just random pitches on the keyboard and try to construct all four of these triads and really internalize what each of these triads sounds like. Okay, so quick ear training quiz. What triad is this?
Diminish.
That's right.
Major.
Minor.
Augmented. That's augmented?
That's augmented, yeah.
Augmented? Yeah, it's just like the most fun
Yeah,
to do.
augmented is usually the one that messes with people the most
Yeah.
when you first start doing ear training, because this is the least common triad. You don't hear it as often as the other ones. Major and minor are super common. Even diminished, you're used to hearing that, but you're not used to hearing that.
Yeah, you just
Very
say
much.
major,
Yeah, it just sounds a little bit off. Normally, if people don't know what it is, they'll actually think it's diminished because it's so dissonant.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah,
That's the thought I had.
yeah. So keep that in mind, and that's usually one that you have to sort of drill for a little while until you get the sound in your ear. Okay, cool. So now we're going to look at the triads in the major scale. So first we're just going to start by writing out all the notes in the major scale. So C, D, E, F,
What does that happen?
G,
Oh.
A, B, and C. Okay, so how do we make a triad? Well, we just go up. We take each of these as a root, and then we go up in thirds, right? So our first triad is C, E, G. Our next triad is D, F, A. E, G, B.
So you're just doing major ones right now, right?
This is the major scale, and we're writing out all of the triads, which are just the set of 3 notes separated by thirds. We're going to go over the qualities in a moment.
But so those triads like you're making aren't major or minor?
They are both major and minor. We'll go over the qualities in a moment.
And diminished.
Next we have F, A, and C.
Back.
G, B, and D, right? Because when we get to B, we skip over C, and so we end up at D. So G, B, and D. Gibida. A, C, E. A, C, E. And B, D, F. B, D, and F. And then we're back to C, so I'm not going to write that up. So let's figure out the qualities of each of these. C, E, G. C to E is what interval?
Major third.
That's right, major third. C to G is what interval?
Perfect fifth.
Perfect fifth. So that's a major triad, right? So I'm going to denote that by a uppercase Roman numeral 1. D to F is what interval?
It's also major third.
Minor third.
It's a minor third because D to E is a tone and E to F is a semitone, right? Because there's no accidental between E and F. So D to F is a minor third. D to A is what?
That'd be a perfect fifth.
It's a perfect fifth, right? So this is a minor triad, right? We're going to denote that with a lowercase Roman numeral 2. These are corresponding to the scale degrees. E to G. What's that interval?
E minor third
That's right. And E to B.
and perfect fifth again.
That's right. So this is a minor triad. So that's a lowercase Roman numeral 3. F to A.
Major third. Yeah.
That's right. And F to C.
Perfect fifth again.
Right. So this is a major triad. So that's an uppercase Roman numeral 4. G to B.
That'd be major for third again.
Yeah, that's right. This is a major triad. Uppercase 5. A to C.
Minor third.
That's right. And A to E.
Perfect fifth again.
That's right. So this is a lowercase 6. B to D.
Minor third.
Now B to F.
Don't do it.
Diminished.
Diminished fifth. That's right. So this is not minor. This is diminished. The way we denote diminished is we make it lowercase, and then we also put this cool little circle next to it. That means diminished.
Okay.
You just have to accept it.
Can we go through where the fuck those Roman numerals are coming from?
This is classical notation
Okay.
to denote chord functions, and we'll talk about what that means
Good.
soon. So once we get back to C, this again is uppercase 1. So like I said, these numbers are corresponding to the scale degree on which each of these triads is built. The case of the Roman numeral tells you whether it's major or minor or diminished.
But diminished has that little circle.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So major is uppercase, minor is lowercase, diminished is lowercase with a circle. And just for information, if we were to have an augmented triad, let's say we had an augmented fifth, for example, then you denote that with a plus. So that's the other modifier. The augmented triad is not naturally occurring in the diatonic major scale, so we're not including it in this example. Okay, so by doing this, we've set up a pattern of major, minor, and diminished triads, which is true and will hold for any major scale. Any major scale that you're playing in will follow this pattern of major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished, major. Always. This is the set of triads that make up the major scale. So let's just go through that really quick. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and back to 1. So these triads fall into 3 categories. We have, I'm just trying to decide which colors to use. Yeah, let's do this. So we have tonic, dominant, and then predominant or subdominant. I'm just going to say S-dom. So we have tonic, subdominant, and dominant. Okay, what does that mean? Under tonic, we have the 1 chord. Under subdominant, we have, I'm going to use blue. Actually, no, I should use the colors to denote function. Yeah, okay, I'm going to do that. So we have the 1. Under subdominant, we have the 4. Under dominant, we have the 5, right? And these are corresponding directly with the names of our scale degrees that we went over last time, right? We have our tonic, we have our dominant, and we have our subdominant.
So does this apply to all scales or just to C?
All major scales.
Okay.
So the C major scale is an example.
Yeah.
It's a specific scale, but this theory and the way of denoting these chords applies to any major scale, regardless of its root.
Okay.
So as we were going over last time, we have the tonic, and then we have the dominant, which is a fifth above the tonic, and we have the subdominant, which is a fifth below the tonic. And so very quickly, we've created the world's simplest chord progression. 1, 4, 5, 1. And each of those chords has a different function in context. 1, that's our home. That's where we live. Subdominant, we're going out. We're going to the store. We buy something, we go back home. Simple storytelling, right? Each of these chord families have other chords from the scale that we can pull upon. So the other tonic chords in the scale are 6 and 3. 2, 3. The other subdominant chord is the 2, and the other dominant chord is the 7. What does this mean? It means that these chords can fulfill similar functions to 1, 4, and 5. Do I have enough space? I have just enough space. Okay, so we're home. And then we venture out. And then we buy something. And we go home. What did I just do? I went 1 to 2 to 7 to 6. So notice how it still felt like a natural progression. It felt like we were going somewhere, we introduced tension, and then it was resolved in a pleasing way. This is what you call functional harmony. Every chord that is built from the scale has a function, and if you use them in a certain order, each of them fulfills their function and provides a forward trajectory with the chord progression. So notice also that these relationships are separated by thirds. So actually okay, no, this is fine. I have everything I need. So 1, the 1 chord, C, E, and G. Now let's compare this to the 3 chord. Well, we have an E and a G, right? The E and the G are shared. It is 2 out of 3 shared notes. The only difference is the C becomes a B, right? So those are what you would call closely related chords. That's the 1, that's the 3. All that changed is the C went down a semitone. The other 2 notes stayed the same, right? So that is part of the reason why 1 and 3 are both considered tonic chords. Same with the 6. Let's look at that. So C, E, and G. The 6 has a C and an E. The only difference is instead of a G, it has an A. So C, E, G, C, E, C, E, A. So they're sharing 2 of the 3 notes, so they function in a similar way. Let's look at the subdominant chords. So the 4 chord, F, A, and C. Now let's compare that to the 2 chord, which is D, F, and A. So the F and the A are shared by each of these chords. The only difference is the C becomes a D. But because it has those 2 shared notes, they function in a similar way. And again, with the 5 chord, we have a G, B, D. When you move a third, we have B, D, F. The B and the D are shared. The only difference is the G becomes an F. And actually, this is more tense because of that diminished 5th. And that is ultimately the purpose of a dominant chord. The dominant chord introduces tension, and it necessarily resolves back to the tonic. So we've got the 1 chord. That's the destination. It's often the starting place, but ultimately it's the destination. It's where we want to end up. So let's work backwards. Well, before the 1 chord, we need a dominant chord, right? Which is either going to be the 7 or the 5. And these live in a family together. Before those chords, you usually have your predominant chords or your subdominant chords. Which is the 4 and the 2. Again, these live in a family. And before those, you may have your other tonic chords. These are essentially tonic substitutions. So you have your 6 chord and you have your 3 chord. And these are kind of like a pseudo family, I suppose. So there's lots of different ways that you can move from one chord to the next. So from the one chord, you can pretty much go to anything. You can get away with doing quite a bit, moving from the one. From our dominant chords, we pretty much always want to resolve home. But it is also possible to resolve to the 6, right? Because the 6 fulfills a similar tonic function. Our predominant chords, the 4 and the 2 usually want to go to a dominant chord. The 2 really strongly wants to go to the 5, and that's because the 2 is a fifth above the 5. So the 2 actually has a dominant relationship to the 5 itself. The 4 can actually go to the 2, because the 2 is more closely related to the dominant family than the 4 is. The 4 is firmly in the subdominant. The 2 is subdominant, but it has more tendency towards moving to the dominant than even the 4 does. And the 3 can go to the 4. The 3 also wants to go to the 6. And again, this is that dominant relationship we keep seeing. The 3 is a fifth above the 6th. And anything that is a fifth above has a tendency to go down to that fifth, a descending fifth. The 4 can also go straight to the 1, which is another kind of cadence. So I wasn't expecting to do this, but I'm just going to define cadence. So cadence is a resolution. It's a chord resolution. The most common kind of cadence is what you call the perfect cadence, which is when you go from a dominant function. Let's do... And you resolve to the tonic. Even more specifically, the perfect cadence is going from 5 to 1. If you were to go from 4 to 1, that's what we call a plagal cadence. That's the 4, resolving to the 1. Amen. Plagal cadence. Okay, cool. So now that we have a bit of a roadmap, we can just start bullshitting our way through chord progressions really easily. So using this map, just tell me to play some chords. I'm going to start with 1. So the 1 can go anywhere. Where should I go?
4.
Okay, so now we're up here. So our options are 2, 7, and 5. Where do you want to go?
5.
We're at 5.
6.
And we're going to go 6. Okay. The 6 wants to go... I don't have it written out here. The 6 wants to go... It can go to either the 4 or the 2. So we're on a 6 right now. Where do you want to go?
2.
Let's go to 2.
7. 1.
We just created a beautiful chord progression
Good job, guys.
by... It's basically paint by numbers. It's that easy, and you can make a functional chord progression. That is pretty much all I have planned for today. So the next exercise that I'd like you guys to do is to start to play with this map and try to just write different chord progressions, just basically following the instructions and see what you can get out of it. Unfortunately, this part got cut off, so I'm just filming it again. The last thing that I want to talk about is a concept that I'm not really sure what it's called, but I'm just going to call it the circle of thirds. The idea being we take each of the chords in the major scale, and we arrange them so that they're separated by thirds. So moving clockwise, we start at 1 and we can move up in thirds, or moving counterclockwise, we can descend in thirds. I'm using these colors to represent the 3 chord families that we have. So 1, 6, and 3 are our tonic family. 4 and 2 are the subdominant family, and 5 and 7 are the dominant family. So what can you do with this? You can measure how related 2 different chords are. We know that if 2 chords are separated by a third, then they share 2 of the same notes, so they are closely related. So as an example, 1, we're playing C major, that's our 1 chord. If we go into a 3, it's only separated by a single note. The other 2 notes are constant in that relationship. Again, 1 to 6, there's only 1 note that changes between the 2 chords. Same with 4. Let's do 4 and 2, only separated by a single note. 5 and 7, only separated by a single note, so they're closely related. And across families, there are close relationships as well. So a 3 is closely related to the 5. It's only 1 note difference. And same with the, let's say the 4 is only 1 note away from the 6. So those 2 are also closely related. Another interesting thing about this chart is we can look at relationships of fifths as well as thirds, because when you have a third and a third, you end up with a fifth. So if we move clockwise, skipping every second triad, we can ascend in fifths. And if we go counterclockwise, doing the same, skipping every second triad, then we can descend in fifths. I'm going to play a chord progression called the descending fifths progression. This is essentially the foundation of Western music. And I'll explain why in a moment. But for now, let's just play it, hear it. So, starting with 1, we descend by a fifth, so we go in a counterclockwise fashion, skipping every second triad. So from 1, we go to a 4. From 4, we go to 7. From 7, we go to 3. From 3, we go to 6. From 6, we go to 2. From 2, we go to 5. And from 5, we go to 1. Okay, so what's happening? Let's break that down in terms of chord family, and let's look at how they function. So our 1 chord, that's a tonic chord, that's home. Well, a tonic chord wants to go somewhere. It wants to go to a subdominant chord, generally. So from 1, we can go to 4. A subdominant chord wants to go to a dominant chord. It wants to introduce more tension. So from 4, we go to 7. Now a dominant chord has so much tension that it wants to resolve to a tonic chord. So from 7, we go to 3. And now from 3, we go down another fifth and we go to a 6. Tonic chord can go to a tonic chord. That's totally fine. There's nothing against that. And now the tonic chord, once again, wants to go to a subdominant chord. So from 6, we go to 2. And now the subdominant chord wants to increase tension by going to the dominant chord. The dominant chord wants to resolve to the 1. And we're back home. We're back at the tonic. So you can see in this descending fifths progression, every chord functions exactly how you would expect, and we're able to play every single chord in the scale in a pleasing manner. And we'll see this come up in other examples in the future.